Imagine this. 15,000 years ago, a hunter crouches behind a boulder, his breath forming clouds in the frigid air. His prey? A massive woolly mammoth, its tusks gleaming like ancient ivory swords. One wrong move, one snapped twig, and his entire tribe starves through the endless winter. But this hunter doesn't know that he's about to witness something far more dramatic than any hunt. He's about to watch an entire continent transform before his eyes. What he doesn't realize is that beneath his feet, the very earth is awakening from its icy slumber. The great glaciers that have held Europe in their frozen grip for millennia are beginning their retreat, carving valleys, creating rivers, and revealing a land that will become the stage for humanity's greatest drama. This is a story of ancient Europe, not just dates and names, but flesh and blood, love and betrayal, triumph and tragedy. Tonight, we'll journey through 10,000 years of human civilization, from the first cave painters who left their handprints on stone walls, to the mighty Roman legions whose eagles soared across continents. Close your eyes and let me take you back to when gods walked among mortals, when heroes carved their names into legend, and when every sunrise brought either glory or doom. The mammoth falls with a thunderous crash that echoes across the tundra. Our hunter, whom we'll call URG, doesn't celebrate yet. In this harsh world, celebration means death. But as he kneels beside his prize, something catches his eye on the distant horizon, a line of green where there was only white yesterday. The Ice Age is ending and Europe is about to be reborn. Picture the scene: vast ice sheets, some over a mile thick, slowly melting under a warming sun. The meltwater carves new rivers, fills ancient valleys, and creates the geography we know today. The Thames, the Rhine, the Danube, all born in this great thaw. But more importantly, this retreating ice reveals something precious: land. Fertile, rich land that will nurture the first European civilizations. URG's descendants won't just survive this change, they'll master it. Within a few thousand years, these nomadic hunters will discover something that changes everything: agriculture. No longer will they follow herds across frozen wastelands. Instead, they'll plant seeds, tend crops, and build the first permanent settlements. The Neolithic Revolution has begun in Europe, and with it, the first whispers of civilization. In what is now Turkey, at a place called Catalhoyuk, something unprecedented is happening. Imagine walking to the world's first true city around 7,000 BCE. There are no streets. Instead, people enter their homes through holes in the roof, climbing down ladders into rooms where families gather around hearths. The walls are decorated with the world's first murals: wild bulls charging across painted landscapes, hunters with spears raised high, goddesses giving birth to the world itself. Look, a mother might whisper to her child, pointing at the painted bull. That is the strength we need. That is the power that flows through us. These aren't just pretty pictures. They're humanity's first attempt to understand their place in the universe, to give meaning to their existence. The paintings in these homes will inspire art for millennia to come. But Europe's transformation is just beginning. As the ice continues its retreat, forests spread across the continent. Oak, beech, and birch create vast woodland kingdoms where our ancestors learned to live in harmony with nature. They become the first Europeans to truly call this land home. In the foggy forests of what will become Britain, tribes gather around stone circles, their faces painted with blue woad, their voices raised in songs that honor the spirits of earth and sky. They don't yet know they're creating the foundations of European culture, but they are. Every ritual, every story passed down around flickering fires, every carved stone, all of it adds to the great tapestry of European civilization. Dawn breaks over the Salisbury Plain, and 1,000 workers strain against massive sarsen stones. The year is 2500 BCE, and the most ambitious construction project in prehistoric Europe is underway. But this isn't just about moving rocks. This is about defying the gods themselves. "Higher!" shouts the chief builder, his voice carrying across the sacred ground. The sun god demands perfection. What we're witnessing is the construction of Stonehenge, but more than that, we're seeing humanity's first attempt to touch the divine through architecture. These massive stones, some weighing as much as 4 elephants, had to be transported over 150 miles without wheels, without pulleys, with nothing but human determination and ingenuity. But why? Why would our ancestors spend generations building these monuments? The answer lies in their desperate need to understand their world. These weren't primitive people. They were sophisticated astronomers, engineers, and mathematicians. Stonehenge isn't just a pile of rocks. It's a computer made of stone, designed to predict eclipses, track the seasons, and connect the earthly realm with the heavens above. Imagine standing in the center of the stone circle on the summer solstice, 4,500 years ago. As the sun rises, its rays stream perfectly through the healed stone, illuminating the altar at the circle's heart. The assembled tribe gasps in wonder. Their ancestors have literally captured the sun itself. This megalithic fever spreads across Europe like wildfire. In Malta, the mysterious temple builders construct Hagarkim and Najdra, underground chambers where goddess worship reaches new heights. The walls are carved with spirals and animals, and in the deepest chambers, priestesses conduct rituals that we can only guess at. She who gives life demands sacrifice. The high priestess intones, her voice echoing off the carved stone walls. From death comes rebirth. From darkness comes light. Meanwhile, in what is now France, the builders of Karnak create something even more ambitious. Over 3,000 standing stones arranged in perfect lines stretching for miles. Walking among these ancient sentinels today, you can almost hear the chants of the Druids, feel the weight of countless rituals performed in their shadows. But perhaps the most mysterious of all are the passage tombs of Ireland's Boyne Valley. Newgrange, built 500 years before the pyramids, contains a secret that took archaeologists decades to discover. Once a year, on the winter solstice, a beam of sunlight penetrates the tomb's narrow entrance, travels down a 60-foot corridor, and illuminates the burial chamber for exactly 17 minutes. Picture the scene. Family members of the dead chief gather outside the tomb in the pre-dawn darkness, their breath visible in the cold December air. As the sun rises, they watch in awe as their ancestors' final resting place is briefly filled with golden light, a sign that the dead still commune with the living, that death is not the end but a transformation. These megalith builders are creating more than monuments. They're establishing Europe's first truly complex societies. Chiefs and priests emerge as distinct classes. Trade networks span the continent, bringing amber from the Baltic, copper from the Alps, and gold from Ireland. For the first time in European history, some people are becoming wealthy not through hunting or farming, but through controlling knowledge and resources. The Age of Kings is about to begin. The bronze sword gleams in the morning light as Thorgrim raises it above his head. Around him, his war band beats their shields and chants his name. Today, they will either return as heroes or join their ancestors in the halls of the dead. The year is 1200 BCE, and Europe is about to experience its first age of heroes. Remember, Thorgrim calls his men, his voice carrying across the Danish coastline. We fight not for gold or glory, but for our families, our honor, and our gods. This is the Bronze Age, and it has transformed European society completely. The discovery that copper and tin could be combined to create bronze, harder and more durable than either metal alone, has revolutionized everything from farming tools to weapons to art. But bronze is expensive. It requires trade networks spanning thousands of miles, specialized craftsmen, and complex societies to support them. This economic revolution creates Europe's first true aristocracy, warrior chiefs who control the metal trade and use their bronze weapons to dominate their neighbors. In the halls of these Bronze Age kings, something magical is happening. For the first time in human history, professional storytellers, bards, are crafting elaborate tales of heroism and adventure. Around flickering hearth fires, they sing of gods who walk among mortals, of heroes who defy fate itself, of love that transcends death. Listen well, young ones, the bard begins, his fingers dancing across his lyre strings. Let me tell you of Sigurd the Dragon Slayer, whose courage was greater than mountains, whose heart burned brighter than the sun itself. These stories, passed down through countless generations, will eventually become the myths and legends we still tell today. The seeds of the Iliad and the Odyssey, of Beowulf and the Arthurian legends, are being planted in these Bronze Age halls. But the Bronze Age isn't just about warriors and kings. In the marshes of Denmark and northern Germany, something extraordinary is being preserved. Human bodies, perfectly preserved in peat bogs. These bog bodies tell stories more vivid than any ancient text. Meet Talon Man, discovered in 1950, but dating to the 4th century BC. His face is so perfectly preserved that he looks like he's merely sleeping. The rope still around his neck tells a darker story. He was sacrificed to gods, possibly to ensure a good harvest or victory in battle. But his peaceful expression suggests he went willingly to his death, believing his sacrifice would protect his people. These bog bodies reveal the spiritual world of Bronze Age Europeans. They believed in powerful gods who controlled the weather, the harvest, and the fate of warriors in battle. Human sacrifice, while horrific to modern sensibilities, was seen as the ultimate gift to these deities. In the Alpine regions, another Bronze Age mystery unfolds. Otzi the Iceman, frozen in a glacier around 3,300 BC, carries with him a complete toolkit of Bronze Age technology. A copper axe, flint knife, bow and arrows, and even a primitive first aid kit. But more intriguingly, he also bears the marks of violence. An arrowhead lodged in his shoulder, defensive wounds on his hands. Otzi's story, reconstructed by forensic scientists, reads like an ancient thriller. He was likely a high-ranking individual, perhaps a chief or shaman, who was murdered while fleeing through the mountains. His tattoos, strategically placed over acupuncture points, suggest he was also a healer. Here was a man who bridged the worlds of the spiritual and the practical, the peaceful and the violent. The Bronze Age reaches its climax around 1200 BC with what historians call the Late Bronze Age collapse. Across the eastern Mediterranean, great civilizations suddenly vanish. The Mycenaean Greeks, the Hittite Empire, the New Kingdom of Egypt, all either collapse or are severely weakened by mysterious invasions and internal strife. But what causes this collapse? Some blame climate change. Others point to invasion by the mysterious sea peoples mentioned in Egyptian records. Still others suggest it was caused by the spread of iron technology, which made bronze weapons obsolete overnight. Picture the scene. A Mycenaean palace burns as invaders storm through its corridors. The palace archives, carefully maintained for centuries, catch fire and crumble to ash. With them disappear the records of an entire civilization, leaving later generations to wonder what great deeds and tragedies were lost forever. The old gods are dying, whispers a surviving priest as he flees the burning city. A new age is coming, an age of iron and blood. He doesn't know how prophetic his words are. The Iron Age is about to begin, and with it, the rise of the civilizations we recognize as the true ancestors of modern Europe. The Celts, the Greeks, and eventually the Romans. The mist rises from the sacred grove as the druid Catbad raises his silver sickle toward the dawn sky. In the ancient oak before him hangs a clump of mistletoe, sacred to the Celts, potent with magical power. Today is the winter solstice, and the ritual about to unfold will determine the fate of the tribe for the coming year. Behold, Cathbad intones, his voice echoing through the forest, the plant that touches neither earth nor sky, yet lives eternal. As it thrives in darkness, so shall our people endure through the longest night. This is Celtic Europe at its zenith, around 300 BCE, and it represents one of the most sophisticated and widespread cultures the continent has ever known. From Ireland to Turkey, from Scotland to Spain, Celtic tribes share a common language family, similar religious beliefs, and above all, a warrior ethos that will inspire legends for millennia to come. But who were these Celts? They weren't a single people, but rather hundreds of tribes united by culture rather than blood. The Gauls in what is now France, the Celtiberians in Spain, the Galatians in Turkey, the Britons in Britain, all spoke Celtic languages and worshipped Celtic gods, yet they were as likely to fight each other as to unite against common enemies. In the hill forts that the European landscape, from Maiden Castle in England to the Hindenburg in Germany, Celtic society reaches new heights of sophistication. These aren't crude barbarian settlements, but complex urban centers with specialized craftsmen, extensive trade networks, and elaborate social hierarchies. Imagine walking to the oppidum of Bibracte in Gaul around 100 BCE. The streets bustle with activity. Blacksmiths hammer red-hot iron into exquisite swords and torques. Potters shape elegant vessels decorated with swirling lateen patterns, and merchants hawk goods from across the known world, silk from China, amber from the Baltic, wine from the Mediterranean. But it's in the great hall of the chief that we see Celtic culture at its most magnificent. The walls are hung with shields and weapons, trophies of 100 battles. Warriors feast on roasted boar, while bards sing of ancient heroes. The air is thick with smoke on the great hearth and the scent of mead and ale. "Tell us of Cu Chulainn," calls out a young warrior, his voice slightly slurred from drink. "Tell us how one man held off an entire army." The bard's eyes light up. This is his moment. In a voice trained from childhood, he begins the epic tale of the Táin Bua Cheonge, the cattle raid of Cooley. Listen, and I will tell you the Hound of Ulster, whose rage was so great that the very river boiled around him when he bathed. When the armies of Connacht came to steal the great bull of Cooley, all the men of Ulster were struck down by a terrible curse, all save young Cu Chulainn, barely 17 summers old. These stories aren't just entertainment. They're the foundation of Celtic identity. They teach young warriors how to live with honor, how to face death with courage, and how to achieve the only immortality available to mortals: eternal fame through great deeds. But Celtic society has a darker side too. The Druids, for all their wisdom and learning, practice human sacrifice. Archaeological evidence from sites like Lindau Moss in England reveals the remains of individuals who were ritually killed, some strangled, some beaten, some with their throats cut. These weren't acts of cruelty, but religious ceremonies designed to appease the gods and ensure the prosperity of the tribe. The Celts believe in a universe where gods and mortals interact constantly. Their deities aren't distant figures on mountain tops, but immediate presences who can be bargained with, angered, or appeased. Luff the sun god, the Morrigan the battle crow, Bridget the goddess of crafts and poetry. These aren't abstract concepts, but real beings who influence daily life. In the sacred sites scattered across Celtic Europe, stone circles, holy wells, grove temples, priests perform rituals that connect the human and divine worlds. At Grenay-sur-Ronde in France, archaeologists have uncovered a temple where thousands of weapons were deliberately bent and broken before being offered to gods. These weren't discarded tools, but precious gifts, the ancient equivalent of a billionaire donating his fortune to charity. Celtic women, unlike their counterparts in many ancient societies, wield considerable power. Queen Boudica the Aes Sedai leads a revolt against the Romans that nearly drives them from Britain. Queen Medb of Connacht commands armies and makes war on neighboring kingdoms. Celtic law allows women to own property, seek divorce, and even become druids, the learned class that serves as judges, teachers, and intermediaries with the gods. "A woman's mind is sharper than any blade," declares Queen Scathack as she trains warriors on the Isle of Skye, and twice as dangerous to those who underestimate it. But even as Celtic civilization reaches its peak, storm clouds are gathering on the southern horizon. The Roman Republic, fresh from its victories over Carthage, is looking north for new lands to conquer. Soon, the greatest clash in European history will begin, a struggle between two radically different ways of life that will determine the future of the continent. The Romans are coming, and the ancient world will never be the same. The morning sun casts long shadows across the Athenian agora as Socrates makes his way through the bustling marketplace. Citizens, slaves, and foreigners mingle in the greatest democracy the world has ever known. But the old philosopher's mind is troubled. Around him, the very foundations of civilization are taking shape: philosophy, drama, democracy, science. Yet he knows that knowledge itself is the most elusive prize of all. "Greetings, Meno," Socrates calls to a young aristocrat. "Tell me, what is virtue?" Surely a man of your education can answer such a simple question. Meno smiles confidently. "Of course, Socrates. Virtue is different for different people. For a man, it is to manage public affairs well. For a woman, to manage her household. For a child, to obey their parents." "Ah!" Socrates nods, his eyes twinkling with dangerous intelligence. "But you have told me what virtue does, not what virtue is. If I asked you what shape is, would you tell me that round things are round and square things are square?" And so begins another day in the most intellectually revolutionary city in human history. This is Athens in the 5th century BCE, the golden age of Greek civilization, and the moment when humanity first learns to think critically about itself and its place in the universe. But the Greek miracle doesn't begin in Athens. It starts centuries earlier in the scattered city-states that, the Mediterranean coast. After the collapse of the Bronze Age, Greece enters a dark age that lasts for centuries. The great Mycenaean palaces lie in ruins, writing is forgotten and the population dwindles. Yet from this apparent catastrophe comes rebirth. Picture a young Greek boy named Homer. Yes, that Homer, sitting by a campfire on the island of Chios around 750 BCE. His eyes are clouded with blindness, but his memory contains something precious beyond measure. The complete oral tradition of the Trojan War, passed down through generations of bards. Tonight, for the first time, he will recite the entire Iliad from memory, transforming ancient legends into the foundation of Western literature. Sing, goddess, of Achilles' rage. Homer begins, his voice carrying across a gathered crowd. Black and murderous, that cost the Greeks incalculable pain, pitched countless souls of heroes into Hades' dark. But the Greeks don't just preserve the past. They revolutionize the future. In the city-state of Athens, something unprecedented happens around 508 BCE. A nobleman named Cleisthenes, faced with political turmoil, makes a radical proposal. Let all free male citizens participate in government, not just the aristocrats. Democracy is born. The word itself comes from Greek, demos, people, and kratos, power. For the first time in human history, ordinary citizens, farmers, craftsmen, merchants, have a voice in how they are governed. The Athenian assembly meets on a hill called the Nix, where any citizen can speak and vote on the issues of the day. Citizens of Athens, declares Pericles, the greatest orator of his age, as he addresses a packed assembly. We do not copy our neighbors' laws, but are an example to them. Our Constitution is called a democracy because power is in the hands not of a minority, but of the greatest number. This democratic experiment produces results beyond anyone's wildest dreams. Athens becomes the cultural center of the Mediterranean world. Playwrights like Aeschylus, Sophocles, and Euripides create tragedies that explore the deepest questions of human existence. Philosophers like Socrates, Plato, and Aristotle lay the foundations of Western thought. Scientists like Hippocrates and Democritus begin the long journey toward understanding the natural world through reason rather than superstition. But perhaps most remarkably, the Greeks developed the first truly critical approach to history. When Herodotus sets out to write about the Persian Wars, he doesn't just collect myths and legends. He interviews eyewitnesses, examines physical evidence, and tries to separate fact from fiction. I am going to set down the research I have done, Herodotus writes, so that the great and marvelous deeds of both Greeks and barbarians may not be forgotten, and especially why they fought each other. This is revolutionary thinking. For the first time, someone is trying to understand the past objectively, to learn from it rather than simply celebrate it. History, as a discipline distinct from mythology, is born. The Greeks also revolutionized warfare. When the massive Persian army of Xerxes invades Greece in 480 BC, it seems impossible that the scattered Greek city-states could resist. The Persians have over 1 million men, according to ancient sources, though modern historians estimate far fewer, were elephants and the finest archers in the world. But the Greeks have something the Persians don't: citizen soldiers fighting for their freedom. At the narrow pass of Thermopylae, 300 Spartan warriors under King Leonidas make their legendary stand. They know they cannot win, know they are marching to certain death, yet they never waver. Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, reads the epitaph later erected at Thermopylae, that here, obedient to their laws, we lie. This isn't just military history. It's the birth of the Western ideal of heroic sacrifice for principle. The Spartans at Thermopylae become the model for everyone from Roman centurions to World War II resistance fighters. The naval battle at Salamis shows Greek innovation at its finest. Themistocles, the Athenian general, tricks the Persian fleet into fighting in the narrow straits where their superior numbers become a disadvantage. Greek triremes, smaller and more maneuverable than Persian ships, ram and sink vessel after vessel as the Persian king Xerxes watches in horror from his golden throne on the shore. On, sons of Greece, the Athenian crews chant as they ram another Persian ship. Free your fatherland. Free your children, your wives, the temples of your fathers' gods. But Greek civilization isn't confined to the mainland. From Spain to the Black Sea, Greek colonies spread Hellenic culture across the Mediterranean. In southern Italy, Greek mathematicians and philosophers create schools that rival those of Athens. Pythagoras develops his famous theorem. Archimedes discovers the principle of buoyancy, and Euclid lays out the foundations of geometry. These aren't abstract intellectual exercises. Greek mathematics and engineering make possible everything from the Parthenon to the massive siege engines that Alexander the Great will use to conquer the world. When a Greek engineer calculates the perfect proportions for a temple column or designs an aqueduct to bring fresh water to a city, he's applying principles that will be used by architects and engineers for millennia to come. The Greeks also give us our first glimpse of scientific medicine. In temples dedicated to Asclepius, the god of healing, Greek physicians begin to move away from purely supernatural explanations for disease. Hippocrates, working on the island of Kos, develops the first systematic approach to medical diagnosis and treatment. Healing is a matter of time, Hippocrates teaches his students, but it is sometimes also a matter of opportunity. However, knowing this, one must attend in medical practice not primarily to plausible theories, but to experience combined with reason. This combination of experience and reason becomes the hallmark of Greek thought. Whether they're studying the movement of the stars, the behavior of atoms, or the nature of justice, the Greeks insist on using logic and evidence rather than tradition and authority. But the greatest Greek achievement may be the recognition of human dignity and potential. When Sophocles writes in his play Antigone, "Many wonders there are, but none more wonderful than man," he's expressing a revolutionary idea that human beings, through their intelligence and creativity, can understand and even shape their world. This optimistic humanism will face its greatest test when a young Macedonian king named Alexander sets out to spread Greek culture to the ends of the earth. The Hellenistic age is about to begin, and Greek ideas will travel from Spain to India, from Egypt to Central Asia. But first, the Greek city-states must face their greatest challenge yet, the rising power of Rome. The she-wolf looks down at the two crying infants with golden eyes that seem to hold the wisdom of ages. The year is 753 BCE, according to later Roman calculation, and by the banks of the Tiber River, legend is becoming reality. Romulus and Remus, abandoned by cruel fate, but saved by divine intervention, suckle at the wolf's teats, unaware that they are destined to found the greatest empire the world has ever known. But this is more than legend. It's the birth of an idea that will reshape civilization itself. Centuries later, as Virgil pens the Aeneid, he will trace Rome's origins even further back, to the Trojan hero Aeneas fleeing the burning ruins of Troy. "I sing of arms and the man," Virgil begins, "who first in the shores of Troy, exiled by fate, came to Italy and Lavinian shores, much buffeted on sea and land by the will of the gods. By reason of never forgetting Juno's fierce anger, much too he suffered in war, until he could found a city and bring his gods to Latium." This is no accident. The Romans, unlike any people before them, understand the power of origin stories. They create myths not just to explain their past, but to justify their future. If Rome was founded by descendants of Troy's heroes, if the gods themselves ordained its rise, then Roman conquest isn't mere imperialism, it's destiny. The reality is both more mundane and more remarkable. Rome begins as just another Italian hill town, when 100 scatter across the peninsula. What makes it special isn't divine favor, but something far more practical. The Romans' genius for organization, adaptation, and inclusion. Picture early Rome around 500 BCE. The city has just expelled its last king and declared itself a republic. In the Forum Romanum, citizens gather to debate the issues of the day. But these aren't the refined intellectual discussions of Athens. Roman oratory is practical, focused on concrete problems. How should we deal with the Sabines? Should we build a new aqueduct? What punishment should we give to traitors? "Citizens of Rome," declares Lucius Junius Brutus, the founder of the Republic, "never again shall we bow to the whims of kings. We are free men, and we shall govern ourselves according to law, not the arbitrary will of tyrants." This republican system, with its complex checks and balances between consuls, senators, and popular assemblies, becomes Rome's greatest export. Even after the Republic falls and the empire rises, The ideal of republican government will inspire revolutionaries and reformers from the Renaissance to the American Revolution. But it's Rome's approach to war that truly sets apart. Where other ancient peoples fight for glory, revenge, or plunder, the Romans fight systematically, with clear strategic objectives and methodical execution. They don't just defeat their enemies, they absorb them, turning conquered peoples into Roman citizens and allies. The secret weapon isn't superior technology or individual courage, though Romans have plenty of both, but organization and discipline. The Roman legion is more than a military unit. It's a perfect machine for conquest and control. Imagine you're a Gaulish warrior facing a Roman legion for the first time. You've heard stories of their discipline, but nothing prepares you for the reality. They advance not as individuals seeking personal glory, but as a single organism. Their shields lock together in the famous testudo, tortoise, formation, creating an impenetrable wall of bronze and iron. Their javelins, pila, are designed not just to kill, but to bend on impact, making enemy shields useless. But it's what happens after victory that truly amazes you. Instead of slaughtering the defeated or enslaving everyone, the Romans offer a choice. Submit to Roman authority and keep your local customs, gods, and leaders, or face total destruction. Most choose submission, and within a generation, their sons are serving in Roman legions, spreading Roman power even further. This policy of inclusion creates something unprecedented. A multi-ethnic empire held together not by fear alone, but by shared identity and mutual benefit. A Gallic chieftain's son can rise to become a Roman senator. An Egyptian merchant can trade freely from Britain to Mesopotamia under Roman law. A Spanish farmer can retire to a comfortable villa, his service and allegiance rewarded with land and citizenship. The conquest of the Mediterranean takes centuries, and it's anything but inevitable. Rome faces existential threats that would have destroyed lesser powers. When Hannibal crosses the Alps with elephants and devastates Italy for 16 years, Rome's survival hangs by a thread. Picture the scene at Cannae in 216 BCE, where Hannibal achieves the most perfect tactical victory in military history. The Roman consul Varro, eager for glory, falls into Hannibal's trap. The Carthaginian army pretends to retreat, drawing the Romans into a deadly embrace. Then Hannibal's African veterans close the trap, surrounding and annihilating an entire Roman army. 50,000 Romans die in a single day, the worst military disaster in the city's history. Rome is finished. Hannibal's allies declare, surely they will sue for peace now. But they don't understand the Roman character. Instead of surrendering, the Romans simply raise new armies. They refuse to meet Hannibal in open battle, instead attacking his supply lines and allies. Slowly, methodically, they strangle the Carthaginian war effort. We Romans may lose battles, declares the Senator Fabius Maximus, but we never lose wars. This grim determination becomes Rome's defining characteristic. When things look hopeless, Romans don't give up, they find another way. When the Gauls sack Rome in 390 BCE, the Romans rebuild. When Pyrrhus wins every battle but loses the war, the Romans keep fighting. When civil wars tear the Republic apart, they create the empire. It's this flexibility that allows Rome to succeed where more rigid systems fail. Greek city-states are too proud to change their ways. Celtic tribes are too divided to unite effectively. Only Rome adapts, learns, and grows stronger with each challenge. The conquest of Greece provides a perfect example. When Roman legions first encounter Greek phalanxes, they're initially outmatched. The sarissa-wielding Macedonians have longer spears and better training. But the Romans study their enemies, adapt their tactics, and eventually triumph through superior logistics and strategy. More importantly, they recognize that Greece has something Rome lacks: culture, philosophy, and artistic refinement. Instead of destroying Greek civilization, they embrace it. Wealthy Romans hire Greek tutors for their children. Roman poets model their work on Greek masters. Roman architects copy Greek temples and theaters. Conquered Greece conquered her savage victor, writes the poet Horace, and brought arts to rustic Latium. This cultural synthesis creates something new: Greco-Roman civilization. It combines Greek intellectual achievement with Roman practical skill, Greek artistic beauty with Roman engineering prowess, Greek philosophical speculation with Roman legal precision. The late Republic sees this synthesis reach its peak in figures like Cicero, who combines the oratorical skills of a Greek sophist with the practical wisdom of a Roman statesman. When he denounces Mark Antony in his Philippics, he's using every rhetorical trick invented by Greek teachers, but in service of Roman political ideals. How long, Catiline, will you abuse our patience? Cicero thunders in his most famous speech, when will your unbridled audacity cease to mock us? This is more than political theater. It's the birth of the Western oratorical tradition. From medieval universities to modern law schools, students still study Cicero's speeches to learn how to argue persuasively. But the republic that produces Cicero is already dying. The very success that makes Rome master of the Mediterranean also destroys the citizen farmer ideal that made Rome great. Constant warfare creates a professional army more loyal to successful generals than to state. Vast wealth from conquered provinces corrupts the old Roman virtues. Slaves do the work once done by free citizens. The stage is set for civil war, an emergence of figures who dwarf even the greatest heroes of the past. Julius Caesar will cross the Rubicon and make himself dictator. Augustus will found an empire that lasts for centuries. But first, the Republic must die in a blaze of glory and tragedy that will inspire poets and playwrights for 2,000 years. The age of Caesar is about to begin. The dice fly through the air, catching the torchlight as they spin toward their destiny. Alia iacta est. Julius Caesar murmurs as his horse's hooves splash through the shallow waters of the Rubicon River. The die is cast. Behind him, the 13th Legion follows their beloved general across the boundary between Gaul and Italy, across the line between lawful command and open rebellion. It is January 10th, 49 BCE, and the Roman Republic has just received its death sentence. Caesar knows there can be no turning back. The Senate has ordered him to disband his armies and return to Rome as a private citizen, which means certain prosecution by his enemies and probable death. But Caesar is no ordinary man. For 9 years, he has conquered Gaul, adding a territory larger than the Roman heartland itself to the empire. His legions worship him like a god. His wealth is beyond calculation, and his ambition burns brighter than the sun. My soldiers, Caesar addresses his men as they make camp on Italian soil, we have crossed more than a river today. We have crossed into legend itself. Rome calls us traitors, but history will call us liberators. Liberators of Rome from the corrupt oligarchs who have strangled her greatness. The men cheer, but Caesar's words mask a deeper truth. He isn't fighting to save the Republic. He's fighting to replace it with something entirely new. The old system of citizen soldiers and gentlemen farmers is dying, killed by the very success of Roman expansion. What emerges from the civil wars will be something unprecedented. A monarchy disguised as a republic, an empire ruled by god-emperors who command the loyalty of professional armies. But first, Caesar must survive the most dangerous game in human history, Roman civil war. His opponent is Pompey the Great, once Caesar's ally, now his greatest enemy. Where Caesar has conquered barbarians, Pompey has defeated kings and cleaned the Mediterranean of pirates. Where Caesar is beloved by his soldiers, Pompey commands the respect of the Senate and the established order. The coming conflict will determine not just who rules Rome, but what Rome becomes. The war unfolds like a deadly chess match played across the entire Mediterranean. Caesar moves with lightning speed, capturing Rome itself before Pompey can organize resistance. But Pompey has a grander strategy. He retreats to Greece, gathers the resources of the East, and prepares to crush Caesar with superior numbers and unlimited wealth. Let Caesar win Italy, Pompey tells his supporters with quiet confidence, I have the world. The decisive moment comes at Pharsalus in 48 BCE. 2 armies of Romans face each other across a Greek plain, each convinced they fight for the true republic. In Caesar's ranks stand veterans who have followed him to the ends of the earth. In Pompey's camp gather the senators and aristocrats who see themselves as the guardians of Roman tradition. Citizens, Caesar calls to his men before the battle. Today we fight not against foreign enemies, but against Romans who have forgotten what Rome means. Victory today ends our wanderings. Victory today brings us home. The battle is brutal but decisive. Caesar's veterans, hardened by years of Gallic warfare, break Pompey's larger but less experienced army. Pompey himself flees to Egypt, seeking sanctuary with the young pharaoh Ptolemy XIII. But the boy king, trying to curry favor with the winner, has Pompey assassinated as he steps ashore. When Caesar arrives in Alexandria and is presented with Pompey's head, he weeps. Even in victory, he declares, a Roman should show mercy to a worthy foe. But his tears mask calculation. With Pompey dead, Caesar's free to pursue his greatest prize, the last pharaoh of Egypt, Cleopatra VII. The meeting between Caesar and Cleopatra is the stuff of legend. She has herself smuggled into his quarters wrapped in a carpet, appearing before the most powerful man in the world, like Venus herself emerging from the sea. She is brilliant, beautiful, and utterly ruthless. Everything Caesar admires in a woman and an ally. Great Caesar, Cleopatra purrs in perfect Latin, I come to offer you not just Egypt's wealth, but something far more precious, Egypt's wisdom. Their affair is more than romantic. It's geopolitical. Caesar needs Egypt's grain to feed Rome's growing population. Cleopatra needs Roman protection to secure her throne. Together, they dream of an empire that stretches from Britain to India, ruled jointly from Alexandria and Rome. But Rome isn't ready for such visions. When Caesar returns in triumph, he makes himself dictator for life, a title that terrifies senators who remember the Republic's founding myth of driving out kings. His reforms are sweeping. He reorganizes the calendar, creating the Julian calendar still used today, grants citizenship to entire provinces, and builds massive public works to employ Rome's growing urban population. Yet it's not enough for Caesar. He plans new conquests. Parthia to the east, Germany to the north, perhaps even India following in the footsteps of Alexander. But first, he must secure his power at home. The conspiracy forms in the shadows of the Senate House. Brutus, descendant of the Republic's founder, struggles with his conscience. Cassius, driven by jealousy and principle, provides a practical planning. 60 senators eventually join the plot, united by the belief that Caesar's death will restore the Republic. We are not murderers. Brutus tells his fellow conspirators on the night before the Ides of March. We are surgeons, cutting out the cancer that threatens Rome's body politic. March 15th, 44 BC. Caesar's wife Calpurnia begs him not to go to the Senate, troubled by nightmares of his death. A soothsayer warns him to beware the Ides of March. Even a note detailing the conspiracy is thrust into his hands as he walks to the theater of Pompey, where the Senate is meeting. Caesar ignores them all. Perhaps he truly believes in his destiny. Perhaps he's simply tired of the constant plotting and scheming. Or perhaps, as some historians suggest, he knows that his death will accomplish what his life could not: the final destruction of the Republic and the birth of the Empire. The assassination itself takes less than 5 minutes. As Caesar enters the Senate, the conspirators surround him under the pretense of presenting a petition. Cimber grabs his toga, and the daggers flash. Caesar fights at first, but when he sees Brutus among his attackers, he pulls his toga over his head and submits to fate. "Et tu, Brute?" he gasps. "You too, Brutus?" Whether in surprise or despair, we will never know. 23 wounds end the life of perhaps history's greatest individual achiever. But Caesar's death doesn't restore the Republic. It destroys it completely. Within hours, Mark Antony, Caesar's lieutenant, seizes control of the situation. At Caesar's funeral, he delivers a masterpiece of political theater. "Friends, Romans, countrymen, lend me your ears." Antony begins, his voice carrying across the packed forum. "I come to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do lives after them. The good is often interred with their bones." By the speech's end, the Roman mob is ready to burn down the houses of every conspirator. Brutus and Cassius flee the city, their dream of Republican restoration turned to ash. But Caesar's true heir isn't Antony. It's his grandnephew Octavian, barely 19 years old, when he learns of his adoption in Caesar's will. Where Antony is a soldier and essentialist, Octavian is a politician of genius who understands that power in Rome now flows not from birth or oratory, but from controlling the army and feeding the masses. The second triumvirate, Antony, Octavian, and Lepidus, briefly shares power while eliminating their enemies in a bloodbath of prescriptions. Cicero, Caesar's greatest critic, has his head and hands nailed to the speaker's platform in the forum where he delivered so many brilliant speeches. But the partnership can't last. Antony takes the east and falls under Cleopatra's spell, dreaming of an oriental monarchy with Alexandria as its capital. Octavian consolidates power in the west, presenting himself as a defender of Roman tradition against foreign corruption. The final showdown comes at Actium in 31 BCE. It's more than a naval battle. It's a clash between two visions of what Rome should become. Antony and Cleopatra's fleet represents the cosmopolitan, Hellenistic world where East meets West. Octavian's navy stands for Roman discipline and Western values. When Cleopatra's ships suddenly withdraw from a battle, taking Antony with them, it's over. The dream of a Greco-Egyptian empire dies in the Ionian Sea. Antony and Cleopatra flee to Alexandria, where they commit suicide rather than face capture. "I will not be led in triumph through the streets of Rome," Cleopatra declares as she places the isp to her breast. Octavian stands alone as master of the Roman world. The Republic is dead, though he will spend decades pretending otherwise. When he takes the name Augustus and becomes Rome's first emperor, he claims to be restoring the Republic, not destroying it. "I found Rome a city of brick," Augustus will later boast, and left it a city of marble. But his greatest achievement is more subtle. He created a political system that combines autocracy with republican institutions, allowing Rome to govern an empire while maintaining the illusion of republican government. The age of emperors has begun. For the next 5 centuries, Rome will be ruled by gods made flesh, by mortals who command the loyalty of millions and whose whims reshape the world. Some, like Marcus Aurelius, will be philosopher kings who use their power wisely. Others, like Caligula and Nero, will prove that absolute power truly does corrupt absolutely. But first comes Augustus, the master politician who transforms the Roman world so completely that his name becomes synonymous with imperial power in a dozen languages. Kaiser, Tsar, Shah, all derive from Caesar. The name Augustus adopted to honor his murdered predecessor and lay claim to his legacy. The Pax Romana, the Roman peace, is about to dawn, bringing 2 centuries of unprecedented prosperity and stability to the Mediterranean world. But it comes at a price: the death of the Republic and the birth of a system where one man's will determines the fate of millions. The Germanic warrior Arminius stands in the dark German forest, rain streaming down his painted face as he watches the greatest military disaster in Roman history unfold before his eyes. 3 entire legions, nearly 20,000 men, struggle through the muddy paths of the Teutoburg forest, unaware that they march into a carefully prepared trap. It is 9 CE, and Rome is about to learn that even the mightiest empire has limits. "Today," Arminius whispers to his fellow chieftains, his breath visible in the cold September air, "we teach the Romans that some lands will never bow to their eagles." But this moment of Germanic triumph comes against a backdrop of unparalleled Roman success. For 2 centuries, from Augustus to Marcus Aurelius, the Roman Empire enjoys what historians call the Pax Romana, the Roman peace. It's the longest period of sustained prosperity and stability in European history, a golden age when Roman law, Roman engineering, and Roman culture spread from Britain to the Euphrates. Yet it begins with Augustus, a man who understands that the secret to power isn't in commanding respect, but in making others want to serve you willingly. Picture Augustus in his modest house on the Palatine Hill around 20 BC. Unlike the flamboyant Caesar, he dresses simply, eats frugally, and claims no titles beyond first citizen, princeps. Yet this unassuming man controls the largest empire in human history. How? Power, Augustus explains to his stepson Tiberius, is like holding a bird. Grip too tightly and you crush it. Hold too loosely and it flies away. The art is in finding the perfect pressure. Augustus's genius lies in creating institutions that will outlast any individual ruler. He establishes a Praetorian Guard to protect the emperor, but limits their numbers to prevent coups. He maintains a Senate and popular assemblies, but ensures they can only ratify his decisions. He creates a professional civil service to administer the empire, but keeps ultimate authority in imperial hands. Most brilliantly, he solves a problem that destroyed Caesar: how to rule an empire without appearing to be a king. Augustus holds power through a collection of republican offices: consul, tribune imperator, each legally granted by the Senate and people. He isn't a monarch. He's simply a very successful politician who happens to hold multiple offices simultaneously. The result is the most successful political system in ancient history. For 200 years, the Roman Empire enjoys internal peace while expanding to its greatest extent. The Mediterranean becomes a Roman lake, surrounded by provinces that stretch from Hadrian's Wall in northern England to the Cataract of the Nile in southern Egypt. But it's not just the size of the empire that's remarkable, it's its diversity and prosperity. In the great cities of the empire, Alexandria, Athens, Antioch, Carthage, millions of people live lives of unprecedented comfort and security. Roman engineers build aqueducts that bring fresh water to cities, roads that allow rapid communication across vast distances, and public baths where rich and poor alike can enjoy hot water and social interaction. Imagine walking through Rome at the height of its power, around 100 CE. The city houses over 1 million people, making it the largest urban center in the world. The streets bustle with activity, merchants from India selling silk and spices, Germanic slaves carrying their masters' litters, British tin traders negotiating with Spanish silver dealers, Egyptian grain ships unloading their precious cargo at Ostia. In the Colosseum, 50,000 spectators cheer as gladiators fight for their lives. The Emperor Trajan, watching from the imperial box, can satisfy or disappoint the crowd with a simple gesture, thumbs up for life, thumbs down for death. But this isn't mere cruelty. It's a complex social ritual that reinforces imperial power while providing entertainment for the masses. Panem et circenses, the satirist Juvenal observes wryly, bread and circuses. Keep the people fed and entertained, and they'll accept any government, no matter how autocratic. Yet Roman civilization is more than mere spectacle. In the law schools of Beirut, jurists developed the legal principles that will form the foundation of Western law. The corpus juris civilis, the body of civil law, creates concepts like the presumption of innocence, the right to legal representation, and a requirement that accusations be proven with evidence. Justice is a constant and perpetual will to give each man his due, declares the jurist Ulpian, not knowing that his words will be quoted in law schools 2,000 years later. Roman engineering reaches heights that won't be matched until the Industrial Revolution. The Pantheon in Rome, completed under Hadrian around 126 CE, features a concrete dome that remains the world's largest unreinforced concrete dome nearly 2 millennia later. Roman roads are so well built that many are still in use today. Roman aqueducts supply fresh water to cities across the empire with a precision that modern engineers admire. But perhaps Rome's greatest achievement is cultural synthesis. In the eastern provinces, Roman pragmatism blends with Greek philosophy and Oriental mysticism to create new forms of thought and art. Mystery religions from Egypt and Persia offer personal salvation to individuals who feel lost in the vast imperial bureaucracy. Neoplatonic philosophers attempt to reconcile reason with faith, preparing the intellectual groundwork for Christianity. It's during this period that a Jewish preacher named Jesus of Nazareth begins teaching in the Roman province of Judea. His message of universal love and personal salvation seems to pose little threat to Roman power. After all, he tells his followers to render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, and unto God what is God's. Yet Christianity's emphasis on equality of all souls before God, Roman and barbarian, free and slave, male and female, contains the seeds of revolution. When the Apostle Paul declares that there is neither Jew nor Greek, neither slave nor free, neither male nor female, for you are all one in Christ Jesus, he's articulating an idea that will eventually transform European civilization. The empire reaches its greatest extent under Trajan, who conquers Dacia, modern Romania, and briefly holds Mesopotamia. Standing on the shores of the Persian Gulf around 115 CE, the Spanish-born emperor might have dreamed of following Alexander's path to India. But unlike Alexander, Trajan understands the limits of Roman power. An empire, he tells his advisors, is like a man's reach. Extend your arms too far, and you lose your balance. Trajan's successor, Hadrian, embodies his wisdom. Instead of further conquest, he focuses on consolidation and defense. His Great Wall across northern Britain becomes a symbol not of Roman expansion, but of Roman limits. For the first time in centuries, Rome acknowledges that some territories are not worth holding. Hadrian himself is a remarkable figure. Soldier, architect, poet, and philosopher rolled into one. He travels constantly throughout his empire, founding cities, building monuments, and studying local customs. In Egypt, when his beloved companion Anninus drowns in Nile, Hadrian's grief leads him to found a city in the young man's honor and even declare him a god. Beauty is truth, truth beauty. Hadrian writes in one of his poems, borrowing from Greek philosophy but adding a Roman twist. For Romans, beauty must serve a practical purpose. It must inspire virtue, commemorate great deeds, or demonstrate imperial power. The empire's golden age culminates with Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher-emperor who rules from 161 to 180 CE. Here is something unprecedented in human history. The most powerful man on earth spending his evenings writing philosophical meditations on duty, virtue, and the meaning of existence. Very little is needed to make a happy life. Marcus writes in his meditations while campaigning on the Danube frontier. It is all within yourself, in your way of thinking. But even as Marcus contemplates philosophy, storm clouds gather on the empire's frontiers. Germanic tribes press against the Rhine and Danube borders in ever greater numbers, driven by climate change and population pressure. The Antonine plague sweeps through the empire, killing millions and weakening the economy. In the east, the revived Persian Empire under Sassanid dynasty poses a constant threat. Most ominously, the Roman military system begins to show strain. The old citizen soldier ideal is long dead, replaced by professional armies recruited increasingly from barbarian tribes. These Germanic and Celtic soldiers fight bravely for Rome, but their loyalty is personal rather than patriotic. They serve specific commanders rather than the abstract ideal of empire. As Marcus Aurelius dies on the Danube frontier in 180 CE, he passes the throne to his son Commodus, a man more interested in gladiatorial combat than governing. The age of good emperors is ending, and the 3rd century crisis is about to begin. But before we witness Rome's struggles, we must turn our attention to the other peoples of Europe, the Germanic tribes who will eventually inherit Roman power, and mysterious cultures that flourish beyond Rome's borders. The empire may be at its height, but change is coming. In the dark forests of Germany and the windswept plains of Eastern Europe, new peoples are stirring, new kingdoms are forming, and new ideas are spreading. The ancient world is about to give way to something entirely different. The medieval world that will remake European civilization completely. The amber gleams like captured sunlight in the Germanic chieftain's hand as he examines the Roman denarius offered in trade. Around his great hall, warriors feast on roasted boar and honey mead, while skalds sing of their ancestors' deeds. Outside, the wind howls across the vast forests that stretch from the Rhine to the Vistula, forests that Rome has never conquered and never will. These Romans, the chieftain muses to his war band, they call us barbarians. Yet which of us raids the other's lands? Which of us enslaves children and calls it civilization? His name is Maroboduus, and he rules a Marcomanni tribe in what is now Bohemia. To the Romans, he is merely another barbarian king. But Maroboduus sees himself as the founder of a great Germanic confederation that will rival Rome itself. He has studied Roman methods, learned from Roman deserters, and adapted Roman tactics to Germanic warfare. The year is 170 CE, and the barbarian world is far more complex and sophisticated than Roman writers would have their readers believe. For centuries, Roman historians have portrayed the peoples beyond their frontiers as savage tribes barely removed from animals. Tacitus, the greatest of Roman historians, writes of the Germans. They live in the woods and swamps, content with their primitive huts and rough clothing. But Tacitus has never lived among the Germans, never seen their impressive fortified settlements or witnessed their sophisticated metalworking. The truth is more nuanced. The peoples Romans call barbarians, from the Greek barbaros, meaning simply foreigner, represent dozens of distinct cultures, languages, and political systems. Some, like the Germanic kingdoms, rival Rome in military power. Others, like the Celtic Druids, surpass Rome in astronomical and mathematical knowledge. Still others, like the Sarmatian horse nomads of the steppes, have mastered forms of warfare that Roman legions cannot match. Take the village of Hedeby in what is now Denmark, around 200 CE. This isn't the crude settlement Roman propaganda would suggest, but a thriving commercial center where merchants from across northern Europe gather to trade. Amber from the Baltic meets Roman silver. Germanic iron tools are exchanged for Byzantine silk, and Slavic furs command premium prices from as far away as Constantinople. In the workshop of Gunnar the Smith, techniques are being developed that won't appear in Roman territories for centuries. Pattern welding, the art of creating steel blades with distinctive wavy patterns, produces weapons superior to anything in Roman armories. Germanic blacksmiths understand metallurgy at a level that Roman engineers can barely comprehend. Each fold of the steel, Gunnar explains to his apprentice, must be heated and hammered just so. The metal itself will tell you when it is ready. Listen to its voice, feel its spirit, and you will create blades that sing with power. This is more than craftsmanship. It's a different way of understanding the world. Where Romans see nature as something to be conquered and controlled, Germanic people see it as a living entity with its own will and wisdom. This philosophy produces not just superior weapons, but a warrior culture that will eventually overwhelm Roman military might. The Germanic warrior ethos centers on personal loyalty and honor rather than abstract patriotism. A warrior follows his chosen lord not because of legal obligation, but because of personal bonds forged in battle and sealed with sacred oaths. When the chieftain dies, his warriors are expected to fight to the death beside his body. Anything else is unthinkable cowardice. Better to die gloriously, declares the warrior poet Hilda Bransleet, than to live with shame. The brave man's name lives forever, but the coward is forgotten before his corpse grows cold. This code produces fighters of extraordinary dedication and ferocity. Roman legions, accustomed to facing enemies who retreat when outmaneuvered, find themselves confronted by warriors who never give up, never surrender, and prefer death to dishonor. But Germanic society isn't purely military. Women hold high status as priestesses, prophets, and even war leaders. The Germanic prophetess Velida leads her people against the Romans and is consulted by warriors before major battles. Germanic law grants women property rights unknown in Rome. Germanic poetry celebrates female courage and wisdom alongside male valor. In the sacred groves where Germanic tribes worship their gods, we see a religious system as sophisticated as any in the ancient world. Wotan, later called Odin, the All-Father, Donner, Thor, the thunder god, Freya the goddess of love and fertility. These aren't primitive nature spirits, but complex deities embodying philosophical concepts about fate, honor, and the relationship between gods and mortals. The Germanic creation myth, preserved in later Scandinavian sources, describes a universe born from the collision of fire and ice, where gods and men are locked in eternal struggle against the forces of chaos. This worldview produces warriors who see battle not as a political necessity, but as a cosmic duty. They fight because fighting itself maintains the order of the universe. When the Wolfenzeit comes, the Skalds sing around their fires. When brother fights brother and the bond of kinship break, then shall come Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. But until that day, we stand guard against the darkness. East of the Germanic kingdoms, in the vast grasslands of modern Ukraine and Russia, another civilization flourishes. The Sarmatians, master horsemen whose influence extends from the Danube to Central Asia. These are not primitive nomads, but sophisticated warriors who have revolutionized cavalry warfare. Picture a Sarmatian cataphract around 250 CE. Both horse and rider completely encased in scale armor, carrying a lance 15 feet long, and a recurved bow capable of piercing Roman mail at 200 yards. This is military technology centuries ahead of its time, the ancestor of the medieval knight, and the inspiration for the Arthurian legends of armored cavalry. The Sarmatian Queen Aimage, ruling around this time, commands an army that can appear anywhere along the frontier without warning, strike with devastating effect, and vanish back into the steppes before Roman reinforcement arrive. Her warriors perfect a feigned retreat that will later make the Huns and Mongols so feared, pretending to flee, then turning to destroy pursuers with flights of arrows. The horse is the Sarmatian soul. Their poets declare, the bow is voice and the sword is judgment. Together, they speak a language that all enemies understand. But perhaps the most sophisticated of all the barbarian peoples are those the Romans never encounter, the emerging Slavic kingdoms of Eastern Europe. In the forests and river valleys of modern Poland, Czech Republic, and Russia, a new form of civilization is taking shape. The Slavs develop a different approach to urban planning, creating fortified settlements called grads that combine military defense with commercial and religious functions. Unlike Roman cities with their rigid grid patterns, Slavic settlements grow organically, following the natural contours of the land and integrating with the surrounding forest rather than dominating it. In the workshop of a Slavic craftsman named Radko, around 300 CE, techniques of metalworking and wood carving are being perfected that will influence European art for centuries. Slavic artisans understand the grain of wood, the temper of metal, and the flow of water in ways that produce tools and weapons of extraordinary beauty and function. Work with the wood's nature, Radko teaches his sons. It will serve you faithfully. Fight against it, and it will crack and splinter when you need it most. This philosophy extends to Slavic religion and politics as well. Instead of imposing divine monarchy like Rome or war leader authority like the Germans, Slavic tribes often practice a form of primitive democracy where important decisions are made by tribal assemblies. Chiefs are chosen for their wisdom and judgment rather than their birth or military prowess. The Slavic pantheon reflects this more egalitarian worldview. Perun, the thunder god, shares power with Veles, the earth god, Mokosh, the mother goddess, and dozens of lesser deities who govern specific aspects of daily life. There is no supreme ruler among Slavic gods, just as there is no supreme ruler among Slavic mortals. But all these barbarian cultures share one thing. They are changing rapidly due to contact with Rome. Germanic tribes adopt Roman military techniques and political organization. Celtic druids preserve classical learning that disappears from Roman territories. Sarmatian horsemen serve in Roman armies and intermarry with Roman families. Most importantly, Christianity begins to spread beyond Rome's borders. Germanic and Celtic missionaries carry the new faith to peoples who have never seen a Roman legion or walked on a Roman road. They adapt Christian teachings to local customs and beliefs, creating new forms of the religion that will eventually compete with Roman orthodoxy. In the monastery of St. Columba on the island of Iona, around 350 CE, Celtic monks preserved classical manuscripts while developing new forms of illuminated manuscript art that combine Christian symbols with pre-Christian Celtic designs. These aren't barbarians. They are scholars, artists, and theologians whose work will help preserve civilization during the dark centuries ahead. God speaks in all languages, declares Columba as he watches his monks copy Greek philosophical texts into Latin. Even the tongues of barbarians can carry divine wisdom. The irony is profound. As the Roman Empire grows increasingly rigid and bureaucratic, the barbarian world becomes more sophisticated and organized. Germanic kingdoms develop law codes, Slavic tribes build urban centers, and Celtic monasteries become centers of learning that rival anything in the Mediterranean world. The stage is set for one of history's greatest reversals. Soon, the barbarians will cease to be Rome's victims and become its conquerors. But this won't be a simple story of civilization versus savagery. Instead, it will be the complex tale of how Europe's future emerged from the creative fusion of Roman organization with barbarian vigor, classical learning with tribal wisdom, Mediterranean urban culture with northern forest traditions. The fall of Rome is coming, but it won't be an ending. It will be a transformation that gives birth to medieval Europe. The purple silk slips from Emperor Romulus Augustulus' shoulders as he signs a document that ends 1,000 years of Roman dominion over Western Europe. The boy emperor, barely 16 years old and ruler in name only, doesn't fully understand what he's signing. But Odo Acer, the Germanic chieftain who now controls Italy, knows exactly what this moment means. It is September 4th, 476 CE, and the Western Roman Empire dies not with a bang, but with a whisper. Your imperial majesty need not fear. Odo Acer says gently to the frightened youth, you will be pensioned honorably. Your life will be comfortable and peaceful. What he doesn't say is that Romulus Augustulus will be the last person to bear the title Roman Emperor in the West for over 300 years. But this ending begins nearly 3 centuries earlier, with the death of Marcus Aurelius in 180 CE. As plague ravages the empire and Germanic tribes press against every frontier, Rome faces crises that would have destroyed lesser civilizations. Yet the empire doesn't collapse quickly. Instead, it transforms slowly, painfully majestically, like a great tree that continues to provide shelter even as its trunk splits and its branches fall. The first sign of trouble comes with Marcus Aurelius's son, Commodus, who prefers the arena to the audience chamber. While the philosopher-emperor spent his evenings writing meditations on virtue, his heir spends his days fighting gladiators and his nights indulging in every vice imaginable. "I am Hercules reborn," Commodus declares to the terrified Senate, dressed in a lion's skin and carrying a club. "Rome herself has chosen me to cleanse her of weakness and corruption." But Commodus is less Hercules than Nero, a vain, cruel man whose erratic behavior destabilizes the entire imperial system. When he is finally assassinated in 192 CE, the empire plunges into civil war as multiple claimants fight for the throne. The year of 5 emperors becomes a pattern that will repeat throughout the 3rd century. Yet from this chaos emerges one of Rome's most remarkable rulers, Septimius Severus, an African-born general who understands that the empire's future lies not with the old Italian aristocracy, but with the provincial armies and populations. His deathbed advice to his sons reveals a new reality: enrich the soldiers and despise everyone else. This militarization of Roman society has profound consequences. The old civic virtues, service to the state, respect for law, devotion to common good, give way to personal loyalty to successful commanders. The Roman army becomes less a national institution than a collection of private armies held together by pay, plunder, and personal charisma. The 3rd century brings what historians call the crisis of 3rd century. 50 years of almost constant civil war, economic collapse, and barbarian invasion. Between 235 and 284 CE, over 50 men claimed the title of Roman emperor. Most died violent deaths within a year or two of taking power. The empire fragments into separate kingdoms: the Gallic Empire in the west, the Palmyrene Empire in the east, with the rump Roman state barely controlling Italy and the Balkans. Yet somehow, Rome survives. A series of soldier emperors, Aurelian, Probus, Diocletian, gradually restore order and unity. But the price is enormous. The old Roman constitution dies completely, replaced by an oriental despotism where the emperor is worshipped as a living god. Diocletian, perhaps the most capable ruler of the later empire, recognizes that Rome has become too large for any one man to govern effectively. In 286 CE, he divided the empire into 4 parts, each ruled by its own Augustus or Caesar. This tetrarchy system provides stable government for a generation, but also formalizes a division between East and West that will eventually split the empire permanently. "The world has grown too large for Rome," Diocletian explains to his fellow rulers. "We must become 4 empires wearing the mask of one, or we will become no empire at all." But the most profound change isn't political, it's religious. In 312 CE, Constantine defeats his rival Maxentius at the Battle of the Milvian Bridge after reportedly seeing a vision of the Christian cross in the sky. Whether the vision is real or invented for political purposes matters less than its consequences. Rome, the empire that once fed Christians to lions, becomes officially Christian. Picture the scene at the Council of Nicaea in 325 CE. Bishops from across the empire, men who remember the great persecutions under Diocletian, gather under imperial protection to define Christian doctrine. Constantine himself, still unbaptized but claiming to be God's chosen instrument, presides over debates about the nature of Christ and the Trinity. "We gather here," Constantine addresses the assembled bishops, "not as subjects of Rome, but as servants of the King of Kings. Let our deliberations establish the faith that will guide humanity until the end of time." The Nicene Creed that emerges from this council becomes one of the most influential documents in human history. But its creation also reveals a new reality of the later empire. Temporal and spiritual power are becoming inseparable, creating a fusion of Roman political authority with Christian religious authority that would define European civilization for over 1,000 years. Yet even as the empire Christianizes, it continues to fragment. Constantine's new capital at Constantinople becomes a center of a Greek-speaking Eastern empire that increasingly sees itself as separate from the Latin West. The two halves of the empire develop different languages, different religious practices, and different approaches to governing their diverse populations. In the Western Empire, the problems multiply faster than solutions can be found. The economy, disrupted by centuries of civil war and barbarian raids, struggles to support the massive military and bureaucratic apparatus needed to hold the empire together. Inflation devalues a currency to near worthlessness. Trade networks collapse as insecurity makes long-distance commerce increasingly dangerous. Most critically, the Western Empire can no longer defend its frontiers with Roman soldiers. Increasingly, Germanic tribes are recruited not just as auxiliary troops, but as entire federate armies federati, who fight under their own commanders in exchange for land and tribute. These barbarian federates often prove more effective than traditional Roman legions, but their loyalty is conditional and their long-term goals don't necessarily align with Roman interests. The Visigothic King Alaric embodies this new relationship between Rome and the barbarians. Technically a Roman general, he commands Gothic troops in service to the empire. But when the Roman government fails to pay his soldiers or grant the lands they've been promised, Alaric does the unthinkable. He marches on Rome itself. As dawn breaks over the ruins of the Roman Forum in the year 500 CE, an old man makes his way carefully through the fallen columns and cracked marble. His name is Boethius, and he is perhaps the last Roman philosopher, the final bridge between the ancient world and whatever comes next. "Console yourself, philosophy," he whispers to the morning air, remembering the words he will soon write in a Gothic prison. The wheel of fortune turns, empires rise and fall, but truth endures forever. He doesn't know that his consolation philosophy will be one of the most widely read books of the medieval period, that his translations of Aristotle will preserve Greek thought for future generations, or that his execution by the Gothic King Theodoric will make him a Christian martyr. He knows only that the world he was born into is dying, and that something new, something unimaginable, is being born from ashes. But we who have followed this long journey through 10,000 years of European history know what Boethius cannot. That endings are also beginnings, that from the fusion of classical civilization with barbarian vigor and Christian faith will emerge a new Europe more diverse, more creative, and more resilient than anything the ancient world produced. The cave painters of Lascaux could not have imagined the Parthenon. The builders of Stonehenge could not have envisioned Roman aqueducts. The Germanic warriors who crossed the Rhine could not have foreseen the cathedrals they would inspire their descendants to build. Yet all of these achievements flow from the same source, the endless human desire to create meaning, to build beauty, to forge communities that outlast individual lives. Ancient Europe gave us democracy and law, philosophy and literature, engineering and art. But most importantly, it gave us the example of peoples who refuse to accept that human beings are doomed to brutality and ignorance. We are giants standing on the shoulders of giants. A medieval scholar will write centuries from now, not knowing how truly he speaks. Every parliament that meets, every court that seeks justice, every school that teaches philosophy, every church that preaches love, every artist who creates beauty, all stand on foundations laid by the ancient Europeans whose stories we have shared tonight. Their voices echo still in our laws and languages, in our art and architecture, in our deepest beliefs about what it means to be human. They whisper to us across the centuries, remember that civilization is fragile and precious. Remember that freedom must be fought for in every generation. Remember that human beings are capable of both greatness and horror, and that the choice between them is always ours to make. Sleep now and dream of ancient heroes. Dream of Celtic warriors riding into battle with painted faces and fearless hearts. Dream of Greek philosophers debating truth in marble porticos. Dream of Roman engineers building roads that last 1,000 years. Dream of Germanic kings forging new nations from the ashes of empire. For in your dreams, ancient Europe lives on, eternal and unconquerable, a light that no darkness can extinguish. If this journey through the mist of time has moved you, stirred something ancient in your soul, or simply helped you understand how our modern world came to be, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more stories from the depths of history. Share your thoughts in the comments. Which ancient civilization spoke to your heart? Which moment gave you chills? Which hero or villain will you remember long after this tale ends? Until we meet again in the realm of stories, remember, you carry the blood of heroes, the wisdom of philosophers, and the dreams of empire builders. Ancient Europe lives in you.